Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chris Before Coffee. Today we're going to be talking about justice on the blockchain, and in particular this guy, well, the guy on the right, is on the run. And today we are joined by Ben Doernberg. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being with us. You're a real hero of mine. And we're also joined by the London Women's Meetup group by Magda.
Hi, thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, and Rhian.
Hey guys.
Rhian Lewis. Everyone's links are in the links below. And you guys are both in the same place, right?
Blockchain, and in particular, this guy.
Oh, someone's got me in the background.
Is on the run. And today we are joined by Ben Doernberg.
Hang on, let me mute you, Janina, because you're talking over it. So, Rhian, you're in Vape Lab at the moment, right?
Yeah. It's that's why it's all dark and spooky. Magda and I came here so that we could come on the show together. So we're sitting at different tables here. For anyone who doesn't know the Vape Lab, it's a really nice place in Shoreditch, and of course you can buy your coffee here with Bitcoin. So we're hanging out downstairs, having our tea and coffee, and enjoying being on the hangout.
Great. And Janina, say hi to us, also from London. Hello. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself. We'll get there. We'll get there. You're new to Hangouts. And Theo, what's going on with you today? Talk to us.
Hi, I'm Mr. Schmidt, and I'm opening a new exchange. It's called BitmogoAssetsRush.x.io, and if you deposit today, I guarantee that you get dividends paid on your account balance every day, approximately 0.02%. And on the days when I feel good, I'll give you 0.12582% compounded in 1 year, and you'll be really rich. And you don't have to do anything, and it's on autopilot. And here I've got the, here you can see the exchange software operating right now, and it's a new high-tech thing. You see the rotation. This is the exchange engine rotating right here, and this is really high-tech. And of course, we do cold storage and stuff like that, and multi-signature that starts with one and everything else.
So, am I right in thinking that we can actually make money whilst we sleep using this investment?
Yeah, of course, you can make money when you sleep. All you got to do is deposit, and you make money, and that's it, basically.
Right, and you're definitely not.
Don't question me because I've got lawyers, right. And don't even do. I've got lawyers, all right.
All right, that's the perfect segue. So Ben, tell us what's going on. What is the latest with Mintpal and Ryan Kennedy, aka Ryan Gentle, aka Alex Green?
Yeah, well, we don't know where Alex or Ryan or whatever you want to call him is. He's the only one with access to the Mintpal system, as far as we know. He's the only one who has the private keys, and there appears to be basically Mintpal's entire Bitcoin balance is just missing, and it's all we think we've through the blockchain to one address, and Ryan is claiming that he was hacked and that someone else has all that money. That seems unlikely, but that's pretty much where it stands today. And so, two of the people who had invested in Moolah, the company, were brought in by Alex to also invest in Mintpal, and so there's two, essentially innocent people who chipped in a bunch of money to own a piece of Mintpal, and now are stuck trying to sort out, what the fuck happened. And so they're trying to figure out, is there anything that can be recovered? Can they at least go back through any kind of records that are left over from the old Mintpal and try and do something? But pretty much, they just got screwed along with everyone else by Ryan. So. Yeah,
how much money are we talking about?
It's not clear because Ryan's the only one who has access to all the balances, but there's that 3,700 bitcoins in one address that seems to be redirected from Mintpal cold storage. There's an unknown amount missing in other alts, and it could be no money. It could be 1,000 bitcoins. We just don't know. And then there's also 750 bitcoins that he's supposed to be holding for the Syscoin team. And then there's also supposedly 750 bitcoins that he took in from investors, mostly from the Dogecoin community, for his company Moolah. But there's no oversight, so it's possible that he has more or less than that. You know, he could have raised 1,000 bitcoins and claimed it was 750. We just don't know.
Now, one of the interesting things here is that when I first saw your video, Ben, back in July, you leaked it onto the internet because you were not satisfied that we had enough transparency coming out from Moolah. Is that correct?
Yeah, I shared it with a few people individually, and then one of those people decided to post it online, but I was fine with that.
And what made you make that decision to record the call at the time?
I was 95% sure that he was using a fake name, and 100% sure that he was doing all kinds of stuff that was illegal. You know, it was kind of, there were two options. He was either a scammer or a moron who was reckless and negligent. And as it turned out, it's probably both. But you know, there was no way that he was on the up and up. He was claiming that Moolah was the only company in the United States that could legally run an exchange in all 50 states. You know, which is just absolutely absurd. And you know, you know, as I said at the time, like, I don't necessarily have a problem if someone wants to run a shady crypto investment scheme and they're saying that it's a shady crypto investment.
Oh, we seem to have lost Ben.
The Moolah guy.
Whilst we're waiting for Ben to come back, Theo.
Oh, I was just saying the Moolah guy is probably hacking us. Are you back, Ben?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't know I'd left.
Yeah, sorry. Just repeat what you just said there.
Oh, about why I recorded the video?
Mm-hmm. Oh, just the last bit. We just lost the last few seconds.
Oh, I just said there's no way. He was claiming it was all above board and legal, and I knew there was no way that was the case. And he said an hour through the video, actually, I'm recording this, you know, and then I was like, well, I'm glad I'm recording this too, because you're a shady motherfucker. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about your interview when I first saw it was what rung alarm bells for me was the offensive that he went on almost straight away. He clearly had something to hide. He was clearly fearful of you, and he started, you know, accusing you of harassing a company officer, as if that somehow gives, I don't know, makes him some kind of legitimate king or something, and like this was a waste of his time. And I don't know about what it's like in the US, Ben, but in the UK that's a serious offence, and I could have you in a small claims court by the end of the week. And to your credit, you just kept your composure, didn't you? You were just like really, really like calm, collected, and just kept pushing him and kept pushing him.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, to some extent that conversation, at least in my intention, was sort of to prove to Jackson Palmer, the founder of Dogecoin, who's also on the call, that this guy was no good. And so my sense was that Ryan's goal was to provoke me into having an emotional reaction, and then he could sort of end the call and say, well, I'm not going to be on here and get yelled at, or, you know, look, Ben's unstable, which apparently he's been telling people that I'm like mentally unstable and have a drinking problem, and people believed him. I mean, he's a very good manipulator. But yeah, so I just, you know, decided that no matter what he said, I was just gonna stay relaxed and stay calm, and I also just didn't take any of his threats seriously. So for me, it was I wouldn't want to say it was amusing, but like it was laughable. I mean, there was no way he was gonna sue anybody because he was using a fake name, you know, and so. Yeah, it was just a very weird experience.
I didn't recognize him at the time, but I know him, or I knew him about 18 months ago. He was a regular in the London tech scene, and he was had a shared office here, and we used to bump into each other all the time at these parties. And I didn't like him back then, and he screwed over a few of my friends for some money, in particular Chris Layden. And I was there. I knew all about that. I was around at the time, and I even went to the event that Ryan was supposedly supposed to be sponsoring, and then, you know, the sponsor money didn't come through. So I knew I recognized the voice from somewhere, but he did such a good job with his vape because he kept hiding his face. It was quite low resolution. His hair was ginger. It was more hair, and I was like, I can't believe I fell for that. Because if I'd have recognized him, I would have been straight on the phone to you to tell you that, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm just baffled by the level of cognitive dissonance within the community. This unwillingness to believe that something could go wrong when so many things have gone wrong before. It's there's on Twitter, among the crypto community on Twitter, because I'm obviously generally a lot more interested in other alts than I am in Bitcoin, and so many people were raising the alarm And then even when Mintpal went down, and the ETA was this, it was that, they were having this issue, they were having that issue, and obviously the devs didn't know themselves what was going on, but there was so much coming out of it. The fact that the front end was basically a template, that should have been an instant warning sign. He was saying, oh yes, we've invested this, we've invested that. It was template, and people spotted that. And there were people like Cobain, Moolah, all those guys. They were sort of instantly calling him out on this, and this was weeks and weeks ago. And everyone just wanted to believe it would be all right. And you can understand it, especially if you've got money on the exchange. You want to believe it's all going to be all right. But it's that thing of hope over experience. I just don't know why it's so prevalent, and it seems really prevalent in our community. There's like a level of it's not realism about these things, it's maybe some kind of idealism. Then when it all goes horribly wrong, everybody is baying for blood and whatever, when there are basic preventive measures that people could take, like not keeping lots and lots of money on exchanges. I know I'm not going to be popular for saying this, but why are we so prepared to believe the best in people? Why do we do it? I'm just interested. I mean, having said that, full disclaimer, I've actually got some money on an exchange at the moment. I'm not saying which one.
Well, no, it's not about hope. It's the Cassandra effect, from Greek mythology. Cassandra had the gift of being able to predict the future, but then Apollo cursed her and said, no one will ever believe your predictions. So you'll go around and you'll warn people about the dangers and the Trojan horse coming in and taking down Troy, but they're not going to believe you, because the hubris. It was the hubris that was their downfall. It wasn't so much that they had good recognition of other people's bad behavior. It's just that the frauds often reveal to us our gullibility. They climb in through a weakness. They climb in through our hopes for the future, about how much we need that money, about that dream holiday that we've always wanted, and they prey on that. Also, big shout out to cognitive dissonance as a subject matter. Everyone on the planet needs to go read this page on Wikipedia right now. It's one of the most important terms you'll ever learn, and so many people suffer from this, and they don't know. It's just real ambiguity. People just don't know how to deal with ambiguity. So I highly recommend this as a learning tool. So where is he now? No one knows where he is. I saw Mintpal Exchange tweet out about 2 days ago that they don't even know where he is. And I've contacted Chelsea Hopkins, who was down on the directors list, and she's also in England. I must have met her before. I don't recognize her, but I must have met her before, because I used to go to the community manager meetups, and that was her job title at Moolah. So what are they saying? What are the other directors saying?
Yeah, so Rhian set up kind of a complicated set of companies where there's a holding company that owns Mintpal that has 48% control over, and Chelsea has 2% control over. The other 50% is owned by two guys who are out their investment in Moolah, the company. They're also out their investment in Mintpal. It turns out Rhian was just not paying any of his bills. A lot of the time, Moolah.io would go down, or Mintpal would go down. It's because he wasn't paying hosting, or he wasn't paying server fees. And so not only are they, on record with this exchange that's blown up, but they're having to pay all these bills that they didn't realize Rhian wasn't paying. So they just got screwed really, really badly.
Weren't they claiming they were getting hacked and denial of service attacks and stuff like that?
Yeah, all of that was Rhian. I mean, yeah, Rhian just wasn't paying bills. Apparently, there was a server with 1,000 bitcoins worth of alts on it that Rhian just didn't pay the bills for, and so it would have all gotten deleted. But I think someone realized that he'd done that, and they, called the hosting company before it was deleted. But I mean, just to give you a sense of, I mean, he doesn't care. It's not his money, and it's all free money to him anyway. So, but yeah, it's really sad. There was someone who made a post on the Dogecoin subreddit about having to explain to her 6-year-old nephew why the nephew's Moolah store, where he sold bracelets to people for Dogecoin, was gone, and that the man who made the company was gone. And I guess her nephew asked if Batman could fix it. But I mean, it's sad all around.
Well, the number of scams are on the rise because it's getting easy as people get more and more desperate to earn a living, and I think so many people are harboring this desire to, for this life where you don't have to kind of work for a slave wage, and how you can just kind of sit back and take it easy. That I think the frauds and the scammers are finding it increasingly easier to scam people, and Theo and I have been talking about this for a while. We often go off looking for scammers. We had one recently, BTC Market Maker on Twitter, that CoinDesk inadvertently ended up publicizing, and somebody got 40 bitcoins stolen off of him because of their inadvertent advert for him, just by featuring him in an article. And these scammers are getting really, really sophisticated now, Ben. Like, they're setting up hundreds of fake profiles on Twitter, having them interact. I noticed that you're a sociologist, so maybe you can talk a little bit about this, but they actually set up fake accounts. They do things like they get pictures from people's private Facebook accounts. They do things like they flip the picture, they distort it slightly so you can't use Google image recognition to find it. They then start having fake conversations. I presume it's just copy-pasted existing conversations from elsewhere on the web to make it look more authentic. And then they just let these accounts mature. They do things like they retweet me, they retweet Andreas Antonopoulos to make themselves look legitimate, and then they start making these slightly too good to be real, slightly too good to be true offers for over-the-counter trades, right? And it's like, look, I must have a good reputation because I'm tweeting between these people. And what they'll do is, Theo tells this story better than I do, but he'll say like, oh, has the wire come through yet? At BTC Market Maker. Yeah, the wire's coming through now. Oh yeah, I got it. That's great. To make it look as though these trades are really going through, but you don't realize these are the sock accounts.
Yeah. So I mean, social proof is a term that's often used for those kind of things. Yeah, I mean, so there's various approaches to trying to combat that. There's this concept of a web of trust where those sock puppet accounts, just because they're retweeting you doesn't mean they have a relationship with you, and so until Chris Ellis endorses them or somebody who knows them, then that could help prevent it a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's there is a reason that securities regulation exists. That's not to say it can't be replaced by something much better and that it doesn't have a lot of negative effects, but I mean, tons of people get ripped off if you don't have some system. And I do just want to talk a little bit about the most worrying part of this to me is just how badly both government regulation and self-regulation failed with Moolah and Mintpal. I know that people contacted at least the U.S. law enforcement authorities in the spring. And in terms of self-regulation, I not only did I warn the Dogecoin community myself several times, and people posted things on Bitcoin Talk, but I contacted, someone affiliated with the Bitcoin Foundation. I contacted someone with the Data Asset Transfer Authority. I contacted, Andreas, who put me in touch with a journalist who didn't end up writing about it at Wired. I mean, not to say that I handled everything perfectly, but the number, I spent, weeks trying to notify people, and it's just not realistic to expect people to do more than notifying the government and like every body that's supposed to be looking out for people. So I think whatever self-regulation and community protection systems we have in place just clearly are not working, and so I think there needs to be a lot of work done. That's something I'm definitely planning on working on. But yeah, it's I don't know where to look for reliable information about a company. I just kind of have to rely on my gut sense and Google it. But there is no good central repository or decentralized repository of information about crypto companies, and that needs to change.
Right. Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. So let's start talking about so something I've been working on in the background to all of this, because I'm sort of fed up with the scammers as well. I put a proposal forward a little while ago, and we're going to talk about it more in a while. This is my GitHub, and this is just a very experimental, open source investigation into Moolah. So as new evidence comes to light, I put it into something called a Git repository, where now this software is traditionally used for programmers, not really journalists or criminal investigators. However, it doesn't matter. It can be used for anything. When you put a file into a Git folder and you start the Git software, it will monitor and track the changes made to those files using cryptographic hash functions. This is an example of one just here and here, and you might recognize those. They often get used in Bitcoin, and that's because it uses the same technology that Bitcoin does. So I thought, well, might be a good idea, as I find evidence online of criminality or anything that could link to criminality, I could scrape the website, download it, put it into a Git repo, I then archive it on archive.org, and then I keep another backup in my Evernote file. And then what I do is periodically I then push these commits to the internet. That's what they're called, commits. Every time you've done a bunch of changes online, you can then do a commit. I then upload it to GitHub. Now, GitHub is actually closed sourced. Git itself is an open source decentralized collaboration tool for coders, not to be confused with GitHub, the centralized closed source social network. However, GitHub has done by far the best job of putting a good user experience and making it look nice and easy to use, and that's why I'm using it. It's also where a lot of the Bitcoin developers hang out, and I wanted them to see it too. Now, the first thing I do when I launch an investigation is I put a commit with the first bundle of evidence, and I sign it with my PGP key, proving that I am the author of this Git repo. The other thing I do, and you probably seen me do it on this show as well, though I don't think I did it in that one. I think I did it in a later one. Yeah. What I also do is I quote the block height of the blockchain, and I quote the Merkle root. The latest Merkle root in the blockchain. Why? Because I want to prove that this piece of content didn't exist any time prior to this upload, right? There's no way I could have known the Merkle root before the Merkle root was generated, because there's so many millions of pounds of electricity going into the generation of this Merkle root every 10 minutes on average, that I can't have possibly have known it. It proves to you that this happened at this time. And then what I do is I stamp the entire thing. I get the actual git commit hash, which is that big long number just there. I go to Cryptography, my favorite site, and I timestamp it like this. It then goes into the Bitcoin blockchain, and that proves that the content can't have existed any time later than the publishing of that blog, thus proving that the content must have existed between two time intervals, not usually outside of 10 to 20 minutes in length, right? It basically removes my incentive to lie about the sequence of activities. Now, lying about the sequence of activities is one of the most common ways criminals use to lie about things that have happened, because the first rule of fraud is don't lie. It's better if you just take little bits of truth, assemble them into a convenient order. It's called narrative fallacy, and sometimes in law, I think, criminology, they call it parallel construction, where you have one line of the truth, you pick the bits you like, and then you create another narrative. And if you can persuade the majority of the people in your little game that this new narrative is the real one, you can actually control their beliefs, and by controlling their beliefs, you can manipulate their behavior. And this is one of the tricks that frauds pull. It's also something that the FBI has been known to pull in court cases before. So I wanted this to be a decentralized technique for the sort of one of the things that's really impressed me in this community, I suppose, is the way that people get together on Reddit and they get together on the forums and they start comparing evidence. The problem with it is that there's no rigor to it at the moment. Everyone just throws stuff up on Dropbox, or they just throw up a JPEG on image sharing websites. And the problem is that can all be falsified. But if you had everyone time-stamping the witnessing of the evidence across the world, and they were all uploading it to Git, proving the state of that evidence, making it impossible to tamper with later on, once you brought all of the bundles of evidence together, you would have proof by repetition. You would have proof sheerly by the fact that all these people independently of each other witnessed this event. Here's the timestamp. It's very, very hard to fake, because if you were going to fake it, it would show up in the narrative. So this is the idea. I'm still working on this. Essentially at the moment I'm in what's called the discovery phase of the investigation, which means that as I go through, all I'm really doing is all I'm really doing is going through and adding links as and when I find them. And so this stage of the process isn't so much about judging whether or not the content is true or false. All this is doing is actually keeping a track of my discovery process. So when I add a new folder, so if we go to the evidence bundle, I put the Japanese date stamp, year, month, date, and then I put the time in UTC format, and then I end it in my initials as well. That's what you're usually told to do in court cases in the UK. And then I add them in the order of which I witnessed them, not in the order of which they were written, just in the order that I witnessed them. And then if other people want to join me, no one has yet, but if other people wanted to join me, they could also add folders, also in UTC time format, and just put their initials, and then their evidence would come in with mine. Then,
Chris,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll let you just finish now. I think this is an amazing technique. It has a lot of potential, but I think it's dangerous as well. I mean, obviously, somebody like you is using it for the best of reasons, and I endorse what you're doing. I would be interested in supporting you in this. However, you mentioned in British courts, and obviously when you take, for example, a libel case into account. Say somebody has published something about someone believing to the absolute best of their knowledge that that is true and correct, and they have put something in the blockchain that says something about a person. Well, at the moment, under current libel law, the amount you can get sued for or whatever is largely dependent on one's ability to rescind that statement. And if something is in the blockchain, it's there for perpetuity. You are not able to rescind it. So somebody who was malicious or possibly mistaken and who had inserted some statements, some facts, some link to some defamatory video in the blockchain, which then could never be removed, it does actually, at the moment, we are operating within the British legal system. So while the two systems are coexisting, I think it is slightly fraught with danger. However, obviously, as a way forward, it's preferable.
So what we're not doing is we're not putting any evidence in the blockchain. We're putting the
You're
Git
not.
hash. Yes, that's correct.
You're not. You see, that's the thing. That was my point. It's the technique.
Yeah, but then that isn't a new problem. Google's been having this problem for 14 years with people putting inflammatory stuff on the internet, and the only way around it now, libel cases are a joke now, because first of all, you have to prove that you had good standing character in the first place, and I think Ryan's going to have a hard time with that. And second of all, you do actually have to prove that it's true, right? The person suing you has to prove that, they have to prove that it's not true. Like, freedom of speech comes first. The consequences of your speech are not protected in law, absolutely, and I think that's right. Yes, you have the freedom of speech, but you also have the freedom to enjoy whatever you're getting coming to you for saying things that aren't true. All we're doing with this exercise is timestamping and checking the integrity of the investigator to prove that the evidence is ready for court straight away as soon as the person witnesses it. And yeah, of course, people can go into the blockchain and write whatever they want. In fact, they already have. There are some allegations in there already. I can't stop that. That's not really what I'm about. That's going to happen with or without my process. I just want to see everyone become a police officer, that's all. I just want to see everyone take personal responsibility in their local area and say, look, I witnessed this thing. I'm not just going to turn away. What's it called? Bystander non-intervention, right? They just see something happen. It's like, not my problem. That's someone else's job. And I'm saying, no, we should take more responsibility.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I just think we should be aware of other people using the technique you're using for maybe ends that are not virtuous. I wasn't saying that, of course, you shouldn't be pursuing this. I think it's a really worthwhile effort. I felt duty bound to kind of point out the issues with placing something in the blockchain that can't be rescinded.
Now that's an interesting thought. So the Git repos are technically, at the moment, are centralized because it sits on my computer and it sits on the GitHub website. And yes, of course, you can download it, but you can also download the destination files as well. And I don't think Ryan's going to find it very easy pulling all of these different websites off. He's going to have a tough time doing that. And Google right now have been subpoenaed by the European courts, telling them that people have the right to be forgotten. I think ultimately the answer to this conundrum will be more speech. Right? If someone has said something inflammatory about you, it's incumbent on you to A, either behave so well that no one believes them, or B, just have more speech to correct whatever it was that they said, or just not engage them whatsoever. I think courage stands the other side of reputation loss. I really do. Now, one of the interesting things is there is a secret piece of evidence in there that I wasn't able to show because the person that sent it to me didn't want me to expose it. So I've actually encrypted that. But what I've also done is I've taken a SHA hash of the contents unencrypted inside, and then I published that as what I call proof of knowledge. So I proved, and then I signed it as well with my PGP key. So I proved the existence and my knowledge of this evidence contemporaneously when I received it, but then I encrypted the file, and that's in the Git repo, but no one can see the contents until I'm told by the owner of that content I'm allowed to expose it, you see. So I have kind of been trying to think, what I suppose I'm trying to do is create an open standard for this stuff, because a lot of this could be automated away very, very easily. You could have a plugin in your browser, and every time you see a troll on the internet, or you see, you know, some crime being committed, you just press a button, it takes a snapshot of the page and it uploads it to some kind of decentralized investigation, and then people can actually build reputations for being good at, you know, tracking these people down. Essentially, I'm trying to raise the cost of this kind of criminal behavior, because at the moment this dishonesty is being rewarded more than the honesty that we need to see.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things with Moolah specifically, was just how unaligned the incentives were. You know, I mean, I'm not complaining, but, you know, obviously I got $0 from being right and trying to call him out, and whereas he stood to gain, as it turns out, millions of dollars. And so he could sit on Reddit all day, every day, manipulating people, and, you know, potentially, like, he definitely had multiple accounts. It's possible he was hiring people on Mechanical Turk in the Philippines to upvote things, or, you know, who knows. And yeah, there's people like Gwern, and there are a lot of sort of internet detectives on the side of good, and they get nothing for that. And so I think potentially some system that people who were saved from a scam, you know, some percentage of that could go towards someone who actually, you know, managed to take the person down, would be an interesting system. And it would also have the negative side effect of all kinds of vigilantes running around attacking innocent people because they're reckless. So, I mean, I think the potential for negative consequences is pretty high also. I mean, it's a really powerful tool, and it will be used by us to do certain things, and it will be used by, you know, Russian far-right nationalists to track down and kill gay people. And, you know, so I think that's just something to, you know, be aware of.
How would they do that? I mean, what would be the method they would use that they're not using at the moment?
And potentially, if you find a photo of someone in a city that's 700 miles away from you, and you upload it to the database of, you know, potential LGBTQ people in Russia, and then people in that area are able to get a hold of it and cross-reference. I'm just saying it's ultimately a tool for gathering information, and that will be used for good and evil. And I tend to believe that, on balance, it will be used for more good than more evil, but I think it is important to recognize the potential downsides.
Well, it's just a tool like any other tool, and you can use it for good or bad. I mean, if I have a hammer, I can hit someone on the head, or I can hit the head of a nail. You know, it just depends on how you use it. But yeah, you're right, we have to be aware of, you know, the possible negative uses. So should we have crypto bounty hunters doing blockchain investigations, or is that too hardcore?
Yeah, I think at the moment we have collaboration tools already. So people can use Google Docs, and if they're determined enough, they can use, you know, Dropbox and tools like this. Really, what I was looking for was a way of adding more rigor to the process, so that the evidence was ready for court. It was ready to be exhibited in court at the moment it was witnessed, rather than submitting it to the police, who are, you know, I've already met someone, I've spoken to someone who said, you can put me in touch with the serious fraud office here in the UK, and he said that if you got this evidence and it's ready for trial, they will jump at the chance on their statistics. But if you go to them and all you've got is a printout of an email, well, you could have just typed that yourself in Word, right? What I was looking for was unfalsifiability. Like, this is definitely true by virtue of the fact that lots of people have witnessed it. It all hashes to the same thing. I mean, the chances, the fact that someone's going to go out of their way to manufacture all of these hash sums is diminishingly low. Like, it's very, very low. They've got to put an awful lot of effort to try and manufacture a fake reality.
Well, I mean, that can get automated too, right? I mean, assuming that 3 years from now this is the state of the art in investigations, then 5 years from now there will be a tool to create a fake one. So, I mean, I think ultimately this is all going to rely on reputation systems and identity systems, and you know, I don't know if there's a way. I think it might just be an arms race forever. I don't know if we're ever going to reach the point where we really stamp this out. I wish, you know, I hope so, but I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see somebody, I'm not sure who it is, but someone saying, is Chris calling for vigilantes? No, because this isn't vigilantism. This is just people doing their duty and reporting a crime when they see it. It's actually a criminal offence in the UK, for example, to drive away from the scene of a car accident, right? If you do that, you can be prosecuted by the police for withholding evidence. So there is already precedent for it. It is also understood that everyone is a police officer. You can make a civil arrest in this country for like 30 minutes. You can detain someone lawfully if you believe that they've committed a crime. So really all I'm trying to do is transpose that for the internet. And of course the police regularly employ private investigators. I was really hoping that I could create a best practice and some tools for trying to bring about some rigor to these investigations, because if we can regulate ourselves internally, like within our community, I think that would go a long way to keeping the other regulators at bay.
I think that's a really good point. I think that people have to think about prevention and, what we were talking about earlier, not fall for these scams. Use a little bit of common sense. And, I think a lot of people, they see that a lot of the early adapters, bought Bitcoin at 25 cents or $2 or whatever, and they got really rich, and they want to get rich too. And so that's one of the weak. And then I think that a lot of the scammers exploit this kind of feeling that a lot of people have. They tried. There are different methods, but they try to exploit this feeling that the people missed out on the big, crypto gold rush, and they try to exploit that. And people just need to, come to reality that, you're not going to get rich overnight. It's not only about trading and getting rich. That's only one aspect of it. Anyway, and this is what people have to just, use your head a little bit. If someone says you're going to get rich overnight, then go away. It's an automatic signal.
So here's the
guy, the signals from the Moolah guy were the video, the way he was acting. I've got lawyers, As soon as someone does that kind of real aggressive stuff, then something is up, in my opinion.
Now, most people didn't see that video because the Dogecoin community's communication systems are really centralized through the subreddit, and the moderators of the subreddit just kept that and a lot of other warnings out. They would just delete them. They banned people from the subreddit. There were at that time one moderator who was about to take a job with Moolah. There was another one who was good friends with Alex, and so I think one of the big lessons for me was just that the communication systems and channels were not good, and I think that's true for Bitcoin also. I mean, Bitcoin Talk is a really inefficient forum. It's still way too hard to get information out to people, and I think there should be a way to kind of, similar to the way I tried to do, to like stake your reputation to something and say, look, this is really important that people see that. Maybe on Bitcoin Talk you could kind of put at risk your post count, or on Reddit you could put your karma at risk and just say, I want to send out a communication to 300 people warning them about something, and if it turns out that in a year or in a month they say that I was wrong, then I lose what I put at stake. But I think the communication issues were a big problem here too.
Yeah, well said. Well, we've also got Suzanne Tempelhoff joining us as well. Hello, Suzanne.
Hi, Darren. How's it going?
Yeah, very well. Why don't we segue then, since you bring up the notion of reputation systems, onto the world citizenship other proposal that I put forward a couple of weeks ago, also on my GitHub, was the idea for a blockchain-based passport. It's up here on my GitHub /Mr. Chris J /world-citizenship, and the goal was to create a way using existing tools only to create a zero-knowledge proof identity system that was voluntary for people based on PGP keys and the Bitcoin blockchain. And all you really need is a group of friends to get together at a venue, preferably a commercial venue. You need a webcam, some PGP software, a printer, and maybe a laminator if you want the thing to look nice when you print it out. You give everyone a basic step-by-step process in PGP and good security and what a good password should be like and the ramifications of losing your key or someone taking it off of them. You then get them to sit in front of the camera, have their picture taken. In fact, one person even forked the project and said you could take a group photo and then actually take sections out of the group photo for each individual. You then put the photo into a document like this one. You include the key, the public key, you include the current time with the block number and the Merkle root, the same way you saw me do on the last project, and then you take a PG, you actually sign this file with the PGP key of the person hosting the event and also the person who owns the passport. You then take the hash of that and you put that in the blockchain, proving that this document existed in this state at this point in time and no other. Now, because of the way the Bitcoin blockchain works, it's a distributed network, as you may know. The way it stores the IP addresses is the way we can source the location. The idea is that if you do it on a commercial company's internet connection, they will have no problem with you advertising their address and exposing their IP address because they have a vested interest in promoting their location to potential customers. So if you do the transmission from the Bitcoin QT client, the full download that you'll need to make, what it will do is it will broadcast the IP address to the neighboring nodes, and it gets stored in something called a debug log file. And then you can use this later on to prove the location of that transaction as it went out at that particular time. Now, what this then means is that if at a later date you come across someone like me and I've got my passport and I show you my passport, you simply have to scan it in and compare it to the one that's being hosted on the internet with the corresponding hash. In fact, you could easily automate this away in an app. You could just scan in the passport and it overlays the one, it compares it to the one that it's got hosted on the internet. It compares the hash to the hash in the blockchain, and then it proves that this document existed, and if you look anything like the person in the document, then of course then that corroborates your identity. Now, what does this not do? I'm not suggesting that people should put their real names on this. They don't even have to have their photo taken if they don't want to. They could use some other biometric indicator, like they could use their voice and we could just hash that. If they just want to play around with it and call themselves Mickey Mouse, I'm totally okay with that as well. It was basically just a way to get around these kind of sock puppet accounts that we see, that if you went to a meetup, what it would do is it would encourage people to start building reputations based on these meetup groups, right? So if you've got Joe the Butcher in your local town and Joe's been there for decades and everyone knows Joe, he can actually host one of these meetups and you can have Joe's passport. Now this Friday, Suzanne at BitNation, who's with us right now, we spent a lot of time last night going through this and mapping this out for Friday. We are going to have a dummy run. And the idea is that every passport can be branded anyway. This is an open source project. You're free to fork it on GitHub, come up with your own ideas, try it out. It's very, very experimental at the moment. And the idea is that you just choose, like maybe I have a BitNation passport, or we have like a World Crypto Network passport, you have a Dogecoin passport, whatever passport you want. All it really has to be is cryptographically secure. So guys, what do you all think about this? Is this dangerous as well? It's an ID system, but remember, it's an ID that you control because only you have your private key.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I really love how low-tech it is actually. Like how easy it is to replicate everywhere. It's great. I mean, this can spread everywhere really quickly.
Rhian, what do you think? Are you worried? Have you got concerns about it? I want to hear the criticisms.
No, I think it's got a lot of potential. I'm just interested to see where it will go. I think broadly it's a really good idea. Be interesting to see how it works running in parallel with current systems. Obviously, there are hurdles such as having people recognize it. But no, I really like the idea. I think these uses of blockchain technology for something other than purely financial is obviously the way things are going to go in future. I think it's an exciting step in that direction, and I'm glad that people are actually doing all this experimental stuff.
And one of the problems with these things is if this gets stolen, not only is it expensive to replace, it's also a security risk to me because someone can then use this to masquerade as my identity. Now, what I'm envisaging with the blockchain passport is that you won't be able to authenticate the passport. Like, let's say you sign up to an exchange and they want to see ID. They'll also ask you to sign a PGP message into the blockchain or on their server to confirm that you are the owner of that passport and you haven't just scanned in someone else's and you're sending that one in, you see. So that was the idea. It's actually more secure than regular ID systems because you've got this second factor.
I think the idea of getting people used to signing things with their keys is kind of critical to this, and I think the more people can work to disseminate this idea and get people used to the concept that they can take responsibility for authenticating themselves is amazing. It's been quite interesting actually. Even I had some invites for keybase.io, and there wasn't actually a huge level of interest among people I know for getting the invites. I thought that was quite surprising when it's something that's so sort of fundamental. I've given them all out now, but yeah, I was quite surprised. I thought people would be clamoring for them.
So this is Keybase, and I highly recommend this website. I cannot believe how cool it is. And we took Janina through it, and we'll speak to you soon in a moment, Janina. And it's just wonderful. You can then prove the existence. I'm logged in through a private browser, so you don't see all the junk on the page. But I can basically prove the existence of all my other social media accounts. So it basically goes onto your social media account, leaves a message with your key, signs. So you're signing your own public key. That's important. I recommend you do that to prove that you are the owner of the key. Then goes on Twitter, leaves a message here, and then you can leave this with traceability. And what this does is it allows you to create a trust account that is linked to the wetware, right? At the moment, anyone can create a penumbra of accounts on the internet, and it could be connected to, well, we don't know who. But one of the interesting things, and Ben, maybe you can speak to this, that came up now, Ajan, who's in Thailand, he came into the conversation and he said, you know, Chris, one of the main reasons for having a passport isn't so much to allow you to travel to places, it's so that when you do go somewhere, that country knows where to send you back to. That's actually a way for them to shield their own liability against you being a criminal or you falling sick. That document is the way to get you back over that home nation's border.
Interesting. So you're saying a passport is kind of like a self-addressed envelope in a way?
It's both ways. And what this might present, and this is what I want to hear you talk about, is this sort of responsibility on the issuer, right? So Joe, our butcher in his village, is like, oh, hang on a minute. Like now people are going to start complaining to me if the people that I'm signing into the blockchain are not legit.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, I think there's I remember reading something or listening to something like 10 years ago that was talking about the right to be sued and sort of how important that was because it enables you to enter into contracts and things that you wouldn't otherwise do because you and I think right now there is no like as you mentioned, CoinDesk has nothing to lose when they endorse and let people know about some company that turns out to be a scam. You know, no one really holds them responsible. I think, one worry is that I could see this compounding in sort of a rich get richer situation where, you're already well known, and so tons of people will feel comfortable verifying you. Andreas Antonopoulos will quickly have 10,000 verifications, whereas someone who's entering the system, from Kenya and doesn't know people, that gap is going to be wider and wider. So I don't know if there are, ways to kind of incentivize people to take the time to verify, kind of more marginalized people. I think that's going to be a real challenge. So I could see yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually, I mean, I started posting a little bit about it yesterday, and we have this ambassador network with a lot of people all over the place, from the Middle East to East and West Africa and Asia and Latin America, and there were instantly like lots of people everywhere who want to set up their own meetups and do the same thing. And so I think it's really going to take off very quickly everywhere. Maybe sort of less quickly than sort of very, North America and places like that. But I don't think it's going to be a problem fundamentally to get it out to developing nations.
So Ben is bringing up something called the Matthew effect, which has plagued me for so long. I've often been troubled by it. It's that and the Sybil attack that really plague me the most when I'm thinking about how to troubleshoot these problems. And yeah, it is the rich get richer phenomena. Okay, I'm a bit worried about this now. Does anyone else have any ideas? How can we prevent this from happening? Is there a level to fame where you don't want to be too famous, but you don't want to be not famous enough? You know, you've got to kind of get that balance right in a community. Magda, you haven't said anything yet. Wondered if you had any thoughts. Oh no, she's gone. She was shy.
I'm back.
Okay.
Talking of being famous, I write a blog about Bitcoin in Polish, bitcoinmama.com, that's with K. And I started that blog in January. And I was very much inspired by the Bitcoin wife and her female perspective in Bitcoin. And I was really surprised how quickly the news spread. I was very much welcomed by the Polish Bitcoin community on Polish Bitcoin forum. And they were very welcoming and very supportive. And initially I introduced myself only as Bitcoin Mama, but then there were these invitations to come on the Bitcoin Rush, and others were actually, I revealed my real identity. And to be honest, I have mixed feelings about this. I don't really want to be famous, if you know what I mean. I'd like to have my privacy, well, maybe not intact, but I'm not very happy to reveal my full profile. I've got family, I've got child, and I don't want to be known too much, if you know what I mean. So I want to contribute as Bitcoin Mama, but not sacrificing my identity.
And your right to privacy and your ability to be able to function, because I can't go anywhere in Shoreditch now without being recognised, because people watch Crypto Network and they see me on the video and they come up to me and they talk to me like they know me, and then I feel rude because I don't know them, or maybe I have met them before but I've forgotten them, and it does create this kind of tension. Like, I don't want to be that famous. I don't want to be so famous that people walk up to me and recognize me and I can't have like a private life. So I don't know that there will be that much advantage to being famous in the future. If anything, it could be a potential risk, as you're highlighting. Now we also have Janina with us. You were having problems with your audio earlier. Can you unmute yourself now? No, you have to unmute. Let me see if I can do it. Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead. So you're going to be our test pilot on Friday. How do you feel about it?
Yes, I'm excited. I think it will be similar like with Bitcoin, that it will be like step to step until mass adoption. People will see it as more and more serious over time, and see like business-related advantages first, maybe. As long as everything is working, like the system is working, then people will look at the business advantages that all this blockchain technology brings, and then maybe later see all the advantages that the idea will bring. And yeah. So I'm excited about all blockchain-related technologies.
One of the interesting things this could do for people is that at the moment people create all these trust accounts on the internet and they have all these various identities, and what I've noticed is over time people do tend to consolidate their identities, right? So if I had an identity and I did really well in the Yahoo Q&A forum, and then I also had another pseudonym over on Twitter for a while, sometimes I might want to step back from that and say, actually, both of those, I don't mind if you both you two communities both know that I was the same person orchestrating that account. And I think that can be quite powerful, because when communities start to compare notes on members of those communities, if I start straddling different meetup groups, and those meetup groups start comparing notes on what Chris is really like, then I don't know, that can also have quite a powerful effect sometimes as well. That also, I think people need to come to terms with the fact that privacy really is a function of time. And the only thing really is that the opposite of truth isn't false. The opposite of truth is time itself, because time is what stands in front of truth. That's what we have to, that's the thing we're all disposed to, that we've got to go through in order to get there. So I think once people start to come to terms with the fact that privacy doesn't really exist in the future, it has to be witnessed first. And if we've got this kind of hyper-connected world, then maybe before they even make the decisions in their lives, before they even commit themselves to certain courses of action, they actually think, now how would I feel if this was public? Because I know, given the level of today's snooping, the number of cameras that people carry around with them, it's impossible to be private anymore. In London alone, you're captured by about 300-400 cameras a day.
I think the advantage of the blockchain is that everything is voluntary. Like you mentioned before, that it's voluntary to put one's name there, one's picture there. One doesn't need to put anything there except for maybe the voice. One can name oneself how one wants. And so I don't see a privacy problem with the blockchain, because it's all made by the people and there's no central organization making use of it. So it's not determine which content has to be there. People don't need to connect it to their real life identity.
Yeah, now I want to highlight something here. So in cryptography, you have something you know, like your passport, something you have, like a phone for two-factor authentication you might be familiar with already, and then you have something you are, which is biometric. And one of the dangers of using biometric as a form of authentication is that it provides an incentive for kidnapping. Because then if they can seize your body, and often when you're arrested, your body is no longer under your control. Who tweeted that? Oh, Taylor Swift on Security. Follow Swift on Security on Twitter. That's where I stole that from. When you are arrested, you lose the control of your physical body. So if you're logging into your iPhone with your thumbprint, forget it. Like if that's got bitcoins on there, they're gonna get them. So we have to think very carefully. Now I'm introducing this notion in this proposal of something you do, because I think the way to get around the Sybil attack is partly through our relationships. We become our relationships. We're defined by those, and I think it's very difficult for you to automate authentic interaction between groups. But also, one of the things you could consider doing is signing your name on one of those graphics tablets. You know the ones I mean, where you get the pen, and it can actually watch the way you write it. You could also do something like audio, where you read out your key into a microphone. Now, someone can take a picture of your face without you having any control over that, not having much control over that, without covering your face. But if someone's going to make you talk into a microphone to confirm your identity, that's an extra step that they're going to have to go to. So I highly encourage people to play around with these tools. So I was going to go to Q&A. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this topic?
I just wanted to ask what we could go ahead and use these passports for. So you're going to make some on Friday. Yep. I was wondering of a real practical example that they could go ahead and be used for. I mean, I think we talked about, you could, if you had a website, you could somehow, post some kind of information that was related to the passport and then prove that it's you. Or I think, like what you said, linking your social media accounts all together, you could somehow prove that they're all really you, or something else that we can go ahead and use. I mean, I think it's really interesting, but it's kind of a novelty unless we can show some utility pretty quickly with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so one of the ideas that we were coming up with last night was I could sell something to Janina, and then we could put that contract into a PGP key, both sign it, and then put the hash of that in the blockchain, and then just post that up on GitHub or our blogs or something. And then the contract would need a clause in it which said that in order for this contract to be modified, you'd have to refer back to this contract. Now, what you can do is you can use something called Merkle trees for this. Let me just pull this up, because some people might not be familiar. So at the moment, I've been hanging out at the Ethereum meetups. Somebody's asking me if I'm on the BitNation team. No, I'm not. I'm very much independent. I want to stay that way. But I am willing to engage with anyone that is brave enough to come up with these kind of ideas. Some people just aren't thinking big enough. and I felt that Suzanne really was, and so I wanted to be a part of that. But I'll also, be joining the Ethereum crew every time they have a meetup. So the advantage of a Merkle tree is you can keep pulling together all of these cryptographic hashes, like the one I showed you earlier. So, well, that's a hash there, for example. Okay, and so every time the contract is updated, you simply concatenate, put the other hash next to the previous one, and from that one, you create a new hash here. Okay, and this is called a Merkle branch. And so every time the contract is updated, and remember, even in law today, the lawyers often say that a contract is never finished. A contract is always, all you're really doing with a written contract at the moment is you're iterating. Right, so all you're doing is you're taking a checkpoint. You're saying this was the agreement they made up to this date. But other agreements can emerge, often referred to in the background. So you can start to maybe take it easy on this particular clause because it turned out not to be such of an issue. And with something like the blockchain, and particularly plugging in through apps and things, you can actually start to iterate on these contracts much more cheaply. You don't have to pay a solicitor. You don't have to pay like £500 every time to update it. You simply sign the agreement both with your PGP keys, update it in the blockchain, and then refer it to a blog post confirming the agreement took place. So that was my idea, Theo, was just to have a simple transaction, maybe give Janina one of these small physical bitcoins that David Bailey here in London sells, and they've got obviously a public key on them, so it would be very easy for me to refer to it and specifically pinpoint that piece of hardware just by its public key and say, right, I transferred the ownership from Chris Ellis to Janina. No?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I mean, from a critical point of view, why do I need the passport to do that?
Well, because if we get into a dispute, let's say we go to another country and there's some kind of dispute between who owns this coin, right? Then no one is going to disagree as long as they understand basic mathematics and they understand how this technology works, which we assume is a minimal educational, step that we have to go through. Once they understand how it works,
that's very
they're not
optimistic.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, even as I said it, I was thinking.
Yeah, an understanding of Merkle trees is just a simple thing for any local police department. That's generous.
You're right. You're right. I don't know. I can't solve everything, but I am optimistic that in time, as younger people grow up, I think that we should definitely be focusing on teaching kids how to understand this technology. But even if we say they outsource their trust to a group of experts, like as is what happens in many of these kind of revolutions, like nobody understands how the engine in their car works, but they trust that it will work. So my hope is you could go to another region and they are going to have all the tools they need there and then to prove the authentication of this contract and form a view on who should rightfully continue the ownership of that coin. But it could be over land as well. You could also transfer the ownership of land. It's anything that has a stable. Yeah, anything that has a stable referent. Anything that has a stable referent you can refer to in the contract. So, Q&A, bottom left-hand corner of this video. I can never remember which side it is on my side. And firstly, I just want to say big thanks to Jamie Nelson, who is reminding us of what a vigilante is. A vigilante means to be vigilant. And I think a lot of us forget that, because when we think of vigilante, we think of news stories where people take the law into their own hands and they start committing acts of violence on the street. In fact, there's been stories recently of so-called street justice. I've been seeing pictures out of China where people get humiliated in public because the police aren't doing their job. So members of the public take it into their own hands. They strip people naked. They throw stuff over them, and it's so vicious that no one wants to intervene. And so often, like one story I was reading, this woman was just left naked and beaten on the floor, and no one called an ambulance until eventually, after many hours, someone had the courage to get a phone out and call an ambulance. Because of course, with that kind of mob mentality, you do not want to be the person calling the phone trying to get the authorities involved, because you don't want to be the next person on the receiving end. So I'm absolutely categorically against that. But I hope that, with the internet, I mean, you can't really hurt someone over the internet directly. You can hurt them with your words, of course, but you can't physically assault someone over the internet. Does anyone have any thoughts on this kind of vigilante stuff? Because it's quite a hot topic.
I totally agree with you, and I think that people need to be more active and not be afraid to, to stand up to things that are wrong in their everyday life without being afraid that they're going to get in trouble themselves. You know, you see that all the time. I see it all the time. It's really crazy. It's unbelievable. Like in the tube or something, here on the underground, I see it. You know, someone is harassing somebody or somebody's doing something and nobody does anything. They just, you know, look at their mobile phones or whatever. And people don't need, it doesn't mean you have to be a vigilante in a bad way, like go around with a shotgun and like with Terminator glasses, try to like, get the bad guys or something. It just means, use common sense. And if someone is being a complete asshole, then, check on people. Say, is everything okay? Are you guys all right? Do you need any help? Just that alone is already a really big step for most people. It doesn't mean you have to be really aggressive about it.
Anyone else? Well, Ben, you're a bit of an authority on bystander non-intervention. So I've noticed as a cyclist in London, if you wear high vis, everyone turns to you if there's an accident. Just because you're wearing high visibility like clothing, everyone assumes you're in charge. You must be. You're bright.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the solutions to the bystander effect is to specifically identify somebody. So instead of saying, somebody help me, you say, you in the red shirt, I need you to call 911. And once people feel a personal sense of responsibility, then they're much more willing to take action. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there are ways to kind of scale up the number of people who feel personally responsible about things. I think a lot of it is, like, I was living in New York City until recently, and the mantra is just like, stay out of it, none of your business. And I watched, I've kind of gotten involved a little bit in some domestic disputes where there's a guy just like literally choking his girlfriend just on the street. And like a lot of people would just like look over and then keep walking. And eventually like me and this other hipster dude like went up and he like started like swinging a shopping bag at this guy. I mean, that's the problem, I think, is that people are scared that things are going to escalate, that the person might have a knife or that the person might have a gun, and people are just not willing to take the risk of dying over, somebody else. So I think partially it's a societal lack of trust in each other. I mean, the chances are really, really high that the people that are around you are not like crazy murderers. And, if people had each other as humans, I think then it would kind of snowball and you'd have like 10 people intervening because probably the guy's not, a psycho killer. And even if he was, he's probably not going to take on 10 people. But I think it's really contagious, this kind of apathy, and just it's not, in the words of The Wire, like, there you go, giving a fuck when it's not your turn to give a fuck. Like, I think it's, it's always everybody's turn to give a fuck. That's kind of my philosophy. But it's also a very, privileged thing. Like, if I get beat up and break my leg, like, my children aren't going to starve because I can't, feed them. So, I mean, different people have different things at stake.
Yeah, that's interesting. So a lot of this is coming down to education. I wonder if this ambassador network, Suzanne, that you're talking about could be the solution to this. How do you inspire a group of people? Because it only requires a critical mass of people spread out across an even geography to be these people that Ben is saying, you in the red shirt, do this, do X, Y, and Z. And then have you got something like a solution emerging?
Well, I think in terms of like neighborhood security and stuff like that, the reputation system itself is an incentive, right? So let's say people can give plus points to anyone if your house is on fire, for instance, and people in the neighborhood assembles to turn out the fire, and then people know who those people are, and they give sort of plus points, like karma points or whatever, and then people feel incentivized to do it, and they can get obviously tip in Bitcoin as well. So I think that would work quite well in places where with little governance, because a lot of sort of thugs are actually not really bad people. They just sort of lack incentives to use their time and energy, for doing, for better things. And like in a lot of places, for instance, like small mafias have control over certain areas, certain neighborhoods, whatever. But the mafia also provides a protection service, right? So if you give them the same incentive, but say instead of like extorting money, we will pay you a tip in Bitcoin whenever you do something, and we will give you plus points, so you will know like who's a good guy, who's not, who we can trust, etc., and track it over time, and it will be with the consensus of the whole community. I think in a lot of sort of small town or small neighborhood sort of mafias or criminals could actually be turned into genuine protection forces.
So you're saying that we need to keep these criminals occupied. We need to give them something to do to keep them busy.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of places they have a social function. We may not agree with the extortion, but I don't agree with any extortion from, including the state, right? So it's not that different. But they may not be genuinely bad people. They may just sort of, yeah.
We talked about criminology on this show before, and one of the things that one of our guests said was oh no, it wasn't on this show, but I did read out what he told me on this show, which is that if somebody feels like they're a victim of something, they will use that to rationalize criminal behavior or immoral behavior. So there are 3 conditions on which you will commit a crime. You have to have the ability, the opportunity, and the rationality. And the rationality breaks down into 2 phases. One, you need to rationalize it by saying, well, I'm a victim, I deserve this. I deserve this restitution. The other thing you have to be able to do is anticipate yourself getting away with it. If you don't believe you're going to get away with it in a timely manner, you're exponentially less likely to carry out the crime. That's my basic level understanding, and I'm not obviously a criminologist. But I don't know that it's as simple as just keeping people occupied. I think there is something, because of course the biggest criminal of all is the government, isn't it? Like we've said this before. Like these are the reason you get these mafias in the first place. It's like the dirty little corner that we keep alive, just to kind of like, well, if corruption exists, we might as well let them have their little fun over there. The problem is that they're not conducive to the whole system thriving. Like we've said many times, like governments don't innovate. They tend to maintain the status quo over time. What they tend to do, even if they're very enlightened and very reasonable, is they watch to see the way the momentum is going, and then once they've identified the momentum, they'll then latch on and try to work out how they can be parasitical on this new paradigm. So I think actually this criminality is part of a much larger problem.
So what you're saying is that it's more a mindset.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think people don't consider themselves as criminals. Bureaucrats don't consider themselves as criminals, although they are working with stolen money, right?
True.
I mean, people who, like, let's say the Italian mafia, they see that they have like a community role, and they also protect people, and so maybe they need to use violence again. But hey, that's in their mind, that's sort of justifiable, right? So I don't think it's a mindset. I think very few people like genuinely sort of wake up in the morning thinking I'm going to be an evil person. That's I think it's more that people rationalize evil.
Yeah, we said before about people that don't know how to ask for help. This was when we were quoting Dante the other day in our last week's show. And one of the differences between the sinners in hell and the sinners in purgatory was that the people in purgatory wanted to change. The people in hell didn't want to change. They were just stuck into the negative bad habits. And there are actually moments in the poem, in the first canticle, where the pilgrim, Dante the pilgrim, tries to help these people, and Virgil pulls him back and says, don't waste your time. They feast on your time. Every minute you try to help someone who doesn't really want to be helped, they are just eating away at your existence. They're eating away at your life. And yeah, I don't have an answer for that kind of behavior either, other than what I've been saying, which is that if we create a new society over here on which there are some rules that just makes these people perish, like they just look at these rules and it's like, I don't want to play by these rules. But you've got no choice. Like, these are open standards. This is baked into the very fabric of the software. It's spread out everywhere, like Bitcoin is. You can't manipulate the rules anymore, because a lot of these frauds, remember, won't play a game unless they know they can cheat ahead of time. They won't even enter into the agreement. So if at first you actually put up a set of rules that they don't want to play by, I think that goes a long way to ostracizing and leaving them outside and saying, well, you've got a choice. Either you change, or you can all just, welcome to each other. You can just go set up you just scam each other all day. I would love it if we could have a little micro community of scammers where all they do is scam each other. That would be fantastic. We could sell tickets. You could watch them.
Yeah.
This would be perfect. Magda, you haven't been saying much. Talk to us. Give us your words of wisdom. You're muted. I can unmute you if you want. I think I have that power.
Yeah, I get confusing the two. Okay, scammers. Yes, since I became Bitcoin Mama, I keep on getting lots of emails with regards to Bitcoin and lots of phishing, lots of spam, and you know, it's very easy to, you know, obviously it's curiosity that you want to click on that link, you want to check this and that, but curiosity killed the cat. So obviously you have to be very vigilant, and you have to double check everything to make sure that you know, you're not going to be scammed. And also once you have Bitcoin, you really need to be aware how to secure them, right? You can't blame anyone for losing your Bitcoin if you haven't secured them, if you don't have paper wallet, if you keep all your Bitcoin, or you keep Bitcoin online, you know, in hot wallets, or, you know, on exchanges. That's not an excuse, you know. You can't blame anyone than yourself for that, you know. So you have to be, security is a major issue, and this is something that, you know, it's not only talking about Bitcoin and saying how great it is, it's also making people aware that with, you know, great power comes great responsibility. So
Spider-Man.
Yeah. So yeah, this is also what we want to talk about with women on our Bitcoin GNO. And it's not only how to get Bitcoin, how to use it, but also how to secure Bitcoin. You know, you can say how great it is, but then if you forget to mention how easy it is to lose Bitcoin, you know, it's failing. You know. So
yeah, you bring up a great point, which is that if you don't own and control, if you are not the unique witness of your private keys, those Bitcoins are not under your control. Because Bitcoin is not about ownership. It's about what you have control over. All a Bitcoin private key is a secret. That's all it is. And a secret in information science is simply information that moves slowly to the adjacent information in it. Secret said, to quote Edward Snowden in the recent documentary that's come out about him, he says, secrets make history. That's right. The things that are secret to us contemporaneously within our society, between our peers, are what are secret between us. But they tell a much bigger story to our descendants later on down the line, who will learn about secrets. Look at all the things that we know now about people hundreds of years ago. I mean, archaeology and anthropology are very young sciences. They've been around for not much more than 100 years. And I don't think that the people that existed thousands of years ago in ancient Greece ever predicted how much we could have known about their day-to-day and their private lives based on all the things that we've uncovered. Because once that information is separated from your space, once it goes out there, you no longer have control over it. And yet people do this all the time. They subscribe to Dropbox and they put private sensitive information inside of that Dropbox, and they don't realize you're basically putting that file on that person's computer thousands of miles away. Imagine getting on a plane with secret, you know, private stuff about yourself, going to someone's house and then leaving it there. That's what you're doing every time you send your coins to these exchanges. So I think what's important, my advice would be, as soon as you send those coins over, detach yourself from them. Pretend as if you no longer own them. Right? Pretend as if, like, that's it, they've gone, I've lost them. And if you get that sinking feeling in your stomach, and then you should not hit send, and you should definitely hesitate before hitting the send button on any cryptocurrency right now. I'm telling you, like, do not. And if someone's talking to you, remember, if you're on a chat room, like on BTCE, on the troll box, you are vulnerable. Why? Because you're approaching a decision, and that makes you vulnerable. That provides an incentive for people that have ulterior motives to start swaying you with that decision. The question you need to ask yourself is this: what does this piece of information that this person is giving me make me want to do? What do I feel like now I'm being told this? And then ask yourself, who profits from this? If I carry out, what does this person stand to gain from it? Because really, the true friendships out there, the real authentic friendships, which, by the way, I think we find very easy to identify, are often ones where the other person doesn't wants the best for you. They don't want to think. They're not just thinking about themselves. And I think we are very good at recognizing that. But I can't get my head around. There are times where we want to be lied to, and there are times where we don't want to be lied to. And I don't know how to tell the two apart. I don't know why we often like being lied to. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, rant over everyone. Anyone got any comments? Let's see what else we got in the Q&A. Also, John posted up a really good definition of vigilante. Yeah, that's the thing that John brings up right here. Okay, if someone isn't watching the watchers, you've got a serious zero-day bug in your civilization, right? If you just outsource all of the vigilance to a centralized group like the NSA, then guess what? The power tends to corrupt, and someone has to watch them. And one of the things that really bothers me, I think you're absolutely right, John, is that we can't watch them back. You know, I'd be okay if the NSA had an open API and we could all plug in and we could get all our own data. I think someone in America even tried to subpoena the NSA because he was in a court case and he believed that they had evidence of his email activity that could be used in his defense. And he said that by withholding that piece of information about him, they were actually prejudicing the trial. I'll need to look more into it to see what actually happened. But that's an interesting test case for the law, right? If the NSA have everything about you, shouldn't you be entitled to see what it is? Silence.
What should we be entitled to again?
The information that so if I'm in the UK, there is a law where if you're recorded on a CCTV camera, you have the right to go into that merchant or whatever and ask for a copy of the footage of you, and they're only allowed to charge you the equivalent of the cost it occurred in giving you a copy. They're not allowed to make a profit from it. Mm-hmm. And that was because it was decided that the problem with this kind of all-seeing eye, or this kind of panopticon, if you look up Foucault, you look up Bentham, this idea of a prison where you've got the prison guards in the middle and they can see everything the prisoners are doing, but what's key here, the prisoners can't see back. And as a result, they start to behave as if they're being watched, even when they're not being watched, right? It's like when you trip over in private and you feel embarrassed at yourself, it's because there's this little miniature version of society that's kind of laughing at you, right? And you can kind of picture the people laughing at you. So it does tend to inform your behavior. So I think in the UK it was decided that, look, it's not good for them to have all the information, because if Facebook knows everything about you, you tend to forget, but they won't. And they'll remember.
There's the Freedom of Information Act in America, but it's highly bureaucratical, so it doesn't really. It just gives lip service to what you're talking about, basically, you know. And you can't get really new information on yourself. You can get more historical information that's some years old, but of course, anything that is, you know, sensitive to what is deemed national security or something won't be in there. So there is an element of that that exists. But it's mostly just giving lip service, and it's highly bureaucratic, so it's not easily accessible.
Chris, I wondered if you had statistics on the prevalence of CCTV cameras in the UK compared with other countries. I mean, this is purely anecdotal, but as you know, I've come back to London recently after 6 months in Berlin, and in between that I was in France. And the first thing I noticed virtually on coming back to this country was the CCTV cameras on every street corner. You know, not just the ones in private premises, but the government CCTV cameras. And you hardly seem to see those in other European countries. And I don't think it is just that I'm over noticing them. I actually noticed when I was in Germany, they do seem to trust people to take responsibility for themselves a lot more than they do in this country, perhaps. I've just been quite stunned by the amount of surveillance there is here. I just don't think I'd noticed it so much before I went away.
Well, according to this article in The Guardian, in 2011, there was something like 1.8 million CCTV cameras in the UK. In London, they are just everywhere. And you know the fucked up thing about it all? They don't even work, half of them. So I had my bag stolen once, and I went to the business like that. It was a drinking establishment, and I said, "Can I get the footage?" And they said, "No, that camera's terrible at night time. It didn't pick anything up." So what's the point? The problem is you've got data proliferation, and then it becomes a function of your ability to search through that data algorithmically, because who's got the time? Like the thing is that what the internet is a proxy for our memory, right? It's essentially a way of controlling the matter in the universe such that we can use it to retain meaningful information by the understanding of difference across space, right? That's what communication is. It's difference across space, right? There have got to be differences between the letters and the paper in order for that to make sense. So you have this concept of difference. If you're able to establish a pattern of difference, you have the beginnings of a language, an alphabet, and syntax, and so on. And all we've really done with the computer is we've just engineered a tool like an electron gun that has the ability to inscribe a lot of this information beyond our direct perception. And we only have access to it with the use of these tools. Now, whoever then commands those tools and has the best algorithms for going through all these yottabytes, zettabytes of data, they're going to be the ones that are powerful, because then they're able to put us inside of these virtual realities. Okay, so let's just quickly wrap up. If no one else has anything to say, sorry, Ben.
I just want to say, and luckily, in the words of the former head of data at Facebook, the best minds of our generation are figuring out how to get people to click more ads. So,
yeah,
that's great.
Right.
So, like Ben was saying, that the ways of communication are not, need to be expanded and so on. So later on tonight, at I forgot what time Eastern, so I should know, is a Bitcoin talk show, and anyone can talk in and on this channel.
It's about 2.5 hours from now. It's about 2.5 hours from now.
So in 2.5 hours, and anyone can call in, Skype, telephone, anonymously, etc. And you can say, hey, what's up? I found a scam, or you can just say, oh, I found a new really good hamburger joint in London, or whatever, and just come chat with us. It's a totally open platform.
Right. So John is saying, oh, this is perhaps a nice thought to end the show on as well. Airlines introduce passports. If a country refuses entry, the only country in the world that must accept the bearer holder is the country of issue. Airlines don't want refugees, etc., in the airports in their responsibility. That's a very good point. Those borders aren't just there to keep the immigrants out. They're also there to keep you in. You're actually a burden on your own government a lot of the time, and they kind of have to put up with you and maybe pay you some benefits so that you don't become a rebel and start revolting on the streets. So I think a lot of us forget that, and we don't realize that a lot of the crony capitalist society that we live in, as we generate more wealth, we simultaneously generate poverty somewhere else, because we essentially de-risk our own position, but we push the risk onto other people, and as a result you end up with this global displacement. And that's really what I was trying to address with this passport. So any final thoughts from the panel before we wrap up for the day? Covered a lot today. No one. Well, all I would say is buyer beware. Education, like so much marketing right now, we don't need more marketing. We need education. We need to help people, because freedom begins with security, and if you can't secure what is in your locality, then you don't really have any freedom whatsoever. And people like Rhian will get away with this time and time again, because he's just able to exploit that. He's able to identify a vulnerability in other people, and he's just masterful. And we need more people like Ben, who's going to do these kinds of background recordings, and they're going to publish them, because we need to be vigilant. So thanks to my guests, to everyone who's joined me. We've got Theo, Suzanne, Rhian, Janina, we've got Magda, Ben. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And join us again in 2.5 hours. You can follow me at Mr. Chris Ellis. You can follow us on Twitter at WorldCryptoNet. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.